Bears blog boys, you know it all, computer analytic, geeky nerds. Michael Schneider, Tom Cavanaugh, the Bear blog boys, know-it-alls, doing some podcast somewhere. Nobody wants to hear you, geeks. You pencil-pushing, skinny jean wearing geeks, you.
Coming to you live from our mama's basement, this is the Bears Blog Boys podcast. I am your co-host, Tom Cavanaugh, here with my good buddy and other co-host, Michael Schneider. Schneider, we are coming to the audience with our part two of the Bears, or not the Bears, the NFC North positional rankings, where the Bears stack up defensively. Buddy, how you doing?
Good, brother. Quick turnaround from Tuesday. Continuing on, we're ranking our position groups in the division by team. We finished off on the offense on Tuesday, and here we're coming. Quick turnaround on Thursday, going into the defense. I think it's going to be a little bit more room for debate, and I'm excited to get rolling, Tom.
I'm excited to get rolling too, because I don't know if our offense rankings were chalky. Like, I think, outside of the obvious ones, we were kind of bold, really putting our stamp on the Bears offensive line, putting them number one. I really liked our discussion about the Lions receiving core versus the Bears receiving core. So other than that, though, I think there were some obvious choices. And as I shared the screen, you guys can see what we had. If you guys didn't listen to that episode, strongly recommend you guys do. This is how we had the offensive ranked out. And I'm happy with where we landed there. I'm curious to see defensively how this thing kind of differs, because like you said, I do think there's more room for debate. With the cornerback room, though, which is what this tier maker has for us discussing first, I think this is pretty easily the Bears as the number one team. I think Jalen Johnson is now the best. Like, it was between him and Jair Alexander. I think, he was even probably better than Jair Alexander, or has been better than Jair Alexander the past two seasons. So now that Jair is gone, I think Jalen Johnson's comfortably the best corner in the division. And then I really, really like what the Bears have in Kyler Gordon as their slot corner. And then, CB2 in terms of an outside corner is a bit more of a question mark. But I think even when you take that to an account, Snyder, the Bears probably have the least amount of question marks and the most star power. So I would think that they're the best cornerback room. Do you have a different answer?
No, I think this one's locked in. Not really up for debate. Jalen Johnson is the best corner in the division, no doubt. Tom, I think it's fair to say Kyler Gordon is the best nickel in the division as well.
Mm-hmm. If Brian Branch played slot full time, maybe there would be a debate, but he moved to safety last year, so I don't even know if you can consider him a slot corner.
Right, and that's where my mind was at as well. And here, I'm high on Tyreek Stevenson. I know the league isn't, so I'm not going to say just for that. But I think when you talk about depth, you look at Terrell Smith has filled in very well. So, I mean, you have at least depth with, there is upside there at the CB2 spot. So, I think the Bears comfortably have this one, Tom. The other ones I think are going to be up for debate. Maybe not. I think maybe two. I'm leaning one way, but not a strong cornerback unit across the division.
I think it's probably one of the worst position groups across the division, especially when you're looking at the Vikings and the Packers. There is a lot of they're banking on a lot going right for those teams. And the Vikings play a weird style of defense where I think they can kind of mitigate some of the issues that they might have from a talent perspective at corner. So that it plays into their favor, no doubt about it. I think secondly, Snyder, it's pretty easily the Lions, because they did also add DJ Reed. They have I don't know why I'm blanking on his name.
Terrion
Arnold, obviously, they're hoping that he takes a big leap next year. And then I think they kind of rotated out in the slot. Brian Branch played some. They had Amik Robertson play the slot. So I think that's a pretty good group, especially when you're comparing two pretty questionable groups with the Packers and the Vikings.
Yeah, that one's easier too, Tom. Just put them in at 2. At 3 and 4 is a big debate, whichever you want to go. They're both not good. I will say that.
I think I think I'd lean the Packers being the third best. I don't know. I just think the Vikings have pieced it together so much that like when Byron Murphy, who was like a solid player, don't get me wrong, like he had a really good season last year. For Byron Murphy, he had a better season than he has in years past. If he's your best corner though, like I think you have a lot of question marks with the remainder of your secondary or your cornerback room because the Vikings actually have a pretty good safety room. So I think I'd rank it Packers third, Vikings fourth.
But dude, let's listen to this Packers cornerback room. Not post Jari Alexander release. I mean, Tom, you have their outside corners, Kayshawn Nixon.
Not great.
Again,
not great.
Not great. Yeah. And then your slot, Javon Bullard, the rookie from last year. I guess they played primarily inside last year.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't grade out too well. I know grades aren't everything. But then on the outside, you have Nate Hobbs. Tom, I remember he came from the Raiders. I'm really not sure how he did last year, but not a strong unit just from like the names, and you even see their grades and production not really there as well, you know?
Yeah, it's not a great group. I think Nate Hobbs is pretty interesting. I know they gave him a pretty decent contract. He's been primarily a slot corner, but
Right, that's what I was thinking.
in the system that where they play a lot of cover two, like I think he could move to the outside and that would make sense and he'd be okay there. But Snyder, listen to the Vikings quarterback. It's not any better, right?
Okay.
Murphy is probably a proven guy of both teams. An argument you want to move them up because of that, but their two starting outside corners are Mekhi Blackman, who I don't think even played last year. I think he was banged up and was like a backup for them. He was a draft pick in 2024. And then Isaiah Rodgers, who's been like a backup everywhere he's been. He was a backup with the Eagles last year, and he's been a special teamer for the Colts. So those are that's their starting cornerback depth right now, our starting quarterback room. So I mean, I'll hear an argument either way. I really think that these are two pretty rough groups.
Yeah, most definitely, Tom. And hey, you got to feel good about the Bears wide receiver room going against both the Packers and the Vikings. And I think there's just a lot more star power there. Lions are solid across the board. Don't get me wrong with some veterans. And they're hopeful for Terrion Arnold. But you got to feel really good about that. You know, those matchups in the division that hopefully we could see a wide receiver room really, kind of take over games there.
For sure. I feel really good about it. And to the Vikings, like I mentioned, to the Vikings credit, like they're not putting these guys in man coverage, like relying on their corners to be really good. Like they're a pretty funky defense. And maybe that's where they have the edge on the Packers, where they're not exposing them as much. But I still think from a talent perspective, the Packers have some younger guys that they're hoping to ascend that I feel better about than the Vikings.
Right.
So I will put the Packers third, the Vikings fourth. Safeties. This one is a lot more interesting because I think a lot of these teams, honestly, outside of the Bears, have invested in the position, or at least in the Vikings case, have had a very, very good player at that position for a very long time. But all in all, Snyder, I just think Brian Branch is such a good player. Like I think he's like in the running, him and Jalen Johnson for the best defensive back in this division. So I think I'd lean for Brian Branch I lean with the Lions to be the best safety with Brian Branch. And then Kirby Joseph is also a good player in his own right. But I just think Brian Branch is such a stud and such a star.
Yeah, I actually think this one's very easy, Tom, for the Lions. Kirby Joseph, damn good. He just got paid, if I'm not mistaken, Tom. Brian Branch, that was your boy going into the draft. I remember you had him as like one of like maybe 5 blue chip guys. And then he actually went in round 2, which was just such a snag. And he's just been a total stud. I mean, that's one of the things you watch, like the film, eye test. That guy is just a damn good football player. Was in college and it's translated really well in the NFL level. Arguably one of the best safeties. Arguably one of the best defensive players across the league, Tom. Total stud. So, yeah, no question, Lions easily number 1 safety spot.
And then when it comes to number 2, I think it's pretty easy as well. I think the Packers probably take the nod here because, they added Xavier McKinney last year. I know Javon Bullard plays in the slot, but they threw I think they used 3 draft picks on safety/slot types. They also added Evan Williams, who I know had a better earlier half of the year than he did the latter half. But I think just when you're looking at proven star power, Xavier McKinney is one of the best safeties in the league. And for that reason, I put the Packers 2 here.
Yeah, no disagreements there. Xavier McKinney is a total stud, man. I still go back. I really wish the Bears would have paid an Xavier McKinney or a Javon Holland just to, kind of have a staple there because I think, I don't know, Tom, are the Bears next on your ranking?
This is where it gets a little tougher, right?
Yeah,
Because it's whatever you think about Harrison Smith and what he's been able to do at age. I think I'm looking. So he was drafted in 2012, right? He's 36 years old, but he's still been playing at a pretty decent level for being as old as he is. He's obviously not the player that he once was. But I mean, the Bears have an older guy, Kevin Byard, too. So
yeah, I gotta say, that's a wash.
It is kind of a wash. Maybe you'd lean the Bears just because there's a path where Jaquan Brisker ascends to a top 12 safety. I think that's somewhat of a reasonable expectation. I don't think Jaquan Brisker will ever be a game-changing safety. At his peak, I don't ever think he'll be a Harrison Smith, but just betting on a younger ascending player, I don't think the Vikings have that player in the chamber to where that's a realistic outcome. So I'll hear an argument either way. Josh Metellus is also a solid player. I think, Josh Metellus, Kevin Byard, again, that's pretty much a wash. So I don't know, Snyder, do you think you'd lean the Bears here?
I get the toss up, right, Tom? I mean, let's look at depth, right? We know the Bears don't have anything there, right?
That's true.
Do the Vikings have any? Do you feel better about the Vikings depth? I don't know if they do either.
Yeah, I really don't. Jay Ward, Theo Jackson, I don't know any of these players, to be honest. This is above my pay grade when we're talking about the Vikings backup safeties, to be honest. So I think it's pretty much a wash when it comes to depth as well.
Okay. I mean, I think it's crazy that Brisker might be the better than Metellus there.
That's kind of how I'm viewing it, right? Or at least there's a very realistic path that he does become better. It's just Brisker's, missed a lot of time and he hasn't been on the field as consistently as you'd want him to. So that's why it's a bit tougher to say, but I still feel pretty confident that Brisker can get there for sure.
Yeah, I think we put the Bears in at the 3rd slot, Tom. But here, I know this is not the point of this episode here, but that's what I was kind of saying. You see the Packers paid Xavier McKinney, and they have a long-term stud. Maybe wasn't at a premium position, but you don't have to worry about it, right? And I wish the Bears would have done something there with Javon Holland, and maybe cut ties with Byard, just to kind of have that long-term solution. You could have got out of the Byard contract, and the average annual salary of a McKinney or Javon Holland, once you eliminate Byard out of the question, really wasn't that much higher, maybe 5 to 7 million, but you're ensuring a long-term piece there. And I think you would have felt better about these rankings, right? To where the room would have been a strength. You have depth, you have the long-term solution. So yeah, I mean, I think the safety position, Lions and Packers are so comfortably 1 and 2. And now if you have one injury with the Bears here, and you can say the same thing about the Vikings, one injury, and man, you're actually really worried going, into games, with a deadly passing attack, and you're rolling out, a 7th round guy or, a rookie that you brought in that, just barely made the roster, that you're giving him, he's the first next man up in case of an injury. So I just think that this position group for the Bears and the Vikings, they're going into the season with so much risk, man.
They really are. And I think especially when you look at Minnesota, with how important the safeties are and how often they disguise stuff. Like I totally see your point, Snyder. Like if I don't think you can just plug and play anyone in this. I think they really need guys who are comfortable rotating post snap and doing all the crazy funky stuff that Brian Flores likes to do. And if one of those guys goes down, like can you maintain that identity that you want to do with being as disguise heavy and blitz heavy and just aggressive? And I think you can say the same thing for the Bears, right? The Bears are like a very big match based defense, and I don't think you can just throw anyone in that defense to play that kind of role. I think that's where Brisker is honestly really going to thrive this year, and then Byard, with his veteran presence, I think will be very comfortable in this scheme as well. But if one of those guys goes down, this is a very different defense, I think, on the back end, more so than with the front, than the Bears have had with Matt Eberflus. Like a very different defense. It's a lot more match based. They are not dropping back in zone and like true spot dropping zone. So yeah, I totally agree. And then when it comes to the safety room, like I totally agree with your point. Like if the Bears had signed Javon Holland this year, and let's say they moved on from Kevin Byard, like this is right there up with the Lions, in my opinion, because Javon Holland was that good. And then you're really hoping that Brisker can ascend and take that next step. If they had those two guys, man, like I think you could make a legit argument to rival the Lions, but the Bears haven't invested that heavily in the position, especially in free agency. And this is kind of why they stand third, arguably fourth, in these rankings when it comes to safety.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like the gap between the Packers and either the Bears and Vikings, it's pretty large, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing, right? It's not that they're not close like some of the other position groups. Like, it's a pretty far gap.
Totally agree. I think that's always important during these exercises. We brought that up on the last show when we were doing the offensive line. Like I think it's really, really closely knit together. There's not a huge tier gap between any of these offensive lines. And it's really important that we talk about that, because you could just like, if you didn't listen to the episode and you just see the rankings, you're gonna be like, oh my God, why were the Vikings last? Or oh my God, why were the Packers last? Where it's like, no, really, like I wish there was a better way to show kind of the tiers of quality each position group was at, because that's what it's important to look at. Obviously, we're doing it. It's fun to like do it with our rival division, but it's like how they stack up across the league too is really, really important. But that's what brings us to maybe the most important position group on the defense, the defensive line. Man, Snyder, this one was really tough. I thought about this one before we even, because we like to do stuff on the fly. We like to bring the analysis to you guys live. But man, the defensive line was really giving me a lot of trouble, because the Vikings made a ton of additions on the defensive line. They bring in Jonathan Allen, they bring in Javon Hargrave, they brought in Jonathan Grenard last year and Andrew Van Ginkel. They drafted Dallas Turner. They made a lot of big additions on that defensive line. But I think when you're looking at star power, who has the best like guys, not depth, all around depth, I think you got to look at the Lions. Like I think Aiden Hutchinson is the best defensive lineman in the division. And then Ali McNeil is no joke either. I think he's one of the better interior players in the league, especially like better two-way interior players. They also have DJ Reader. I think star power wise, Snyder, I would tentatively lean the Lions with a healthy Aiden Hutchinson coming back. I know that their second edge position, there's a lot of question marks there. I think just overall depth, there's a lot of question marks, but it's hard to ignore how much better Aiden Hutchinson is than all of these teams' best defensive linemen.
That's fair, right? Like that's the argument you make, right? That Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, here, Tom, Aiden Hutchinson was on an insane pace last year. Let me just look. Let me pull this up right now. Right? In how many games did he play last year, Tom? I have it right now. In 5 games last year, and one of those he was hurt. He had 45 total pressures, right? Absurd. You look at Montez Sweat in 16 games, only had 49 pressures, right? So the pace that Aiden Hutchinson was on, I think, I could be wrong, but I think may have been on pace to break PFF's total pressure record for a season. He was on a defensive player of the year type of trend. Like you've seen similar numbers from, like, maybe not similar, but like similar dominance from like Michael Parsons, Myles Garrett, like that level of impact, right? Like if you would have gone by that pace, Tom, he would have destroyed Jonathan Grenard, who led the division with around 80 pressures there, right? In a full season for Grenard, a full 17, to where Hutchinson had 45 in only 5 games. He was very, very dominant. And then, you look at Alim McNeil, who is probably the best interior in the division, Tom. I don't think I'm missing. Yeah, he's the best interior defensive line. That guy's jack of all trades, a force in the run game, and he actually gives you some pass rush productivity there. It's hard to argue against your point, Tom. It really is. But then you go to the Vikings. They got a deep unit, dude. They have Jonathan Grenard, who was an amazing free agency signing, over 80 pressures, right? Andrew Van Ginkel. I know, like, he's kind of like maybe a kind of like a niche type of guy there, but he's productive there. You add Javon Hargrave, you add Jonathan Allen, you're still hopeful for Dallas Turner. I mean, I just like the way the Vikings have built this defensive line, just to have, the depth and, different ways to attack you. You can, put guys in on more obvious pass rush situations. I mean, I like it, man. I mean, maybe you could argue, Tom, that maybe they're not there as like a run defensive line unit. I think this one's tough, Tom. But I think I have to lean towards you just for the overall star power, because again, what drives winning games? What drives going deep into the season? What can actually take over a game just from pure dominance? I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that Aiden Hutchinson's impact for the Lions is like that of Aaron Donald with the Rams, right? Like, I think you've seen the way that led you to a Super Bowl. You've seen that way that was, consistently getting you to those deep playoff runs, and just seeing the takeover. Even if you double team him, still straight dominance. I think that is the force that Aiden Hutchinson brings, and I think that alone will carry you farther in games, moving the needle, than a more deep unit. But again, I still love the way the Vikings have built their defensive line.
I think it's between those two teams. Like, and if you're a believer in depth, then the Vikings would be the team for you. But I think I'm with you, Snyder. I think star power is what takes you far in the playoffs, especially on the defensive line. Even if you are double teaming Aiden Hutchinson, like the fact that an offense has to focus so much attention on one player, I think just opens up so much more for everyone else.
Right.
And the Lions have decent depth on the interior. I know their edge 2 is a big question. Like, they might have like the worst edge 2. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big Deo fan, and I'm not a big Lucas Van Ness fan. So maybe I'm wrong there. I actually did like Marcus Davenport, but like, what can you really rely on Marcus Davenport at this point? Like, he's always hurt and just hasn't been the same player for a while. But so I think I will also lean the Lions here for the best defensive line for star power alone. The Vikings could be the number one group. Like, let's say they obviously signed Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. If those guys get back to like 85, 90% of what they were before their injuries, I know they've both been banged up, and they are older players. So, how optimistic can you really be that they get back to who they were? But if even one of them can, I think we're having a lot different discussion. And they also have Dallas Turner, who can ascend and become a better player as well. So there's pathways the Vikings can take hold of this group that I think the Bears and the Packers don't really have. So I'll put them 2. This is where it gets interesting, Snyder, because I think at their peaks, when you look at the Packers defensive line with Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, those 2 guys were studs. They have just not been the same players for a while now. For like at least 2 or 3 years, they have been pretty inconsistent players. I think Kenny Clark, maybe I'm jumping the gun, and it was more of a instant decline this past year and the year prior. But I think he's getting older and is not quite the player he once was. And then ever since Rashawn Gary got that contract extension, I think he's just been very up and down. And then I really liked Devontae Wyatt when they drafted him. Like I was a big fan of him coming out of Georgia. I think he's been a problem in the run game. He's obviously a good pass rusher. They have other issues along with their edge too. Like I just mentioned, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley, and Igbare. I just think it's a very like hit or miss group that sometimes plays really well, but also has a lot of down moments. And they didn't really do anything to address this position group either.
Yeah, they were very stagnant there, Tom. I have to lean towards the Bears. Here it's close. I mean, here you look at Montez Sweat and maybe Rashawn Gary. I think maybe you look at them as a wash, Tom. I think you can kind of wash them out. And I think after you do that, I think it goes towards the Bears, right? Like you have Gervon Dexter, who was productive last year. You have Andrew Billings there, who was very productive last year. Deo, yes, we agree we overpaid him, but he's still a lot better than Lucas Van Ness.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's better than Carl Brooks if you compare him to last year. So I think you have to go with the Bears. They added the second round pick, Tom. Shamar, I always get him and the Bengals guy mixed up. Shamar Turner. So the Bears added to the group as well. I mean, there's at least maybe a little bit more depth, maybe some guys with some more upside. So I have to lean more towards the Bears, Tom.
Yeah, I think I will also lean towards the Bears for this very reason. I think that, like you said, with the upside case, they added a second round pick, and who I wasn't even huge on, our listeners who have listened to us before, partnering with On Tap Sports, knew we were kind of whatever about that pick. We didn't love it. We didn't hate it. But my big breakout candidate was Gervon Dexter. And I think there's like a legitimate path that he does break out in year 3. And I just don't know what player on the Packers defensive line I'm expecting that breakout from. Is it Devontae Wyatt? Like, can he be a better run defender? Because I think he's just already a decent pass rusher. And so for those reasons, that's awesome. But he only plays like a handful of snaps a game because they don't feel confident about leaving him out there on rundowns. And that's just such a big part on the interior. As a pass rusher, as an edge rusher, I think you can get away with not being a great run defender. But on the interior, it's really hard to leave you out there if you can't hold your own against the run. So I think that's always going to be kind of holding him back. And I think that there's a pathway that Gervon Dexter is a more impactful player with defending both aspects of the offense against the run game and as a pass rusher. So of all of the players on the Bears and Packers defensive linemen, I think that Gervon Dexter has the best path of breaking out. And for that reason alone, I would put them above the Packers. And then I think, like you said, it's kind of a wash across the board if you're looking position or player by player.
Right. Yeah. It's the Bears, Tom.
So we will put the Bears ahead of the rival Packers. Linebacker is interesting because I think this is kind of a sneaky good group across the division. I don't know, Snyder. I think maybe do we go the Lions again? They've invested a lot in the position. They spend the first round pick on Jack Campbell. He's been solid. Nothing crazy. And then they have Alex Anzalone, who's been an okay player. They have a lot of options, right? Derek Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez. Like they have a lot of options that they can play at linebacker. So I think I don't think there's any star power in this division at the position, but I think from a depth perspective, I would probably lean the Lions. I don't know. You can convince me otherwise if you have another team.
No, it's the Lions. I think they have 4 dudes that are just very, very solid. I mean, I really like Jack Campbell. I also like Anzalone, a guy who's just a fan favorite, good culture guy. I like Anzalone a lot. And I like the Derek Barnes. They just extended him. Malcolm Rodriguez, when he's on the field, he looks damn good. So I think they have a very good unit. And you actually have to consider depth as well, Tom. So yeah, I think they're comfortably in that number one spot, Tom. Other than that, Tom, I feel like it's tough, right? Because Brian Flores' linebackers, his defensive scheme,
It's weird.
maybe like their stat line, and they're gonna be productive because what they're asked to do, right? They're gonna blitz heavy, and you just have Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman, like they just come in like missiles, right? Like they're very willing tacklers. I really actually like Blake Cashman a lot. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but how do they hold up in other systems when they're asked to do more? Like I don't know if they're like as instinctive or in good as in pass coverage, maybe as like a TJ Edwards or maybe I don't know. I think it's really tough at like the 2 and 3 spot, Tom.
I definitely think it's a lot tougher. I think I'd honestly lean the Packers here, and the Packers could be number one when it's all said and done next year.
Yeah.
Edgerrin Cooper, the second round pick that they took in the 2024 draft, really came on as a rookie. The more time he got to play, he again was also kind of in a funky role in college, and I think he was learning kind of the more traditional NFL the same way, Center. Really good at coming forward, still kind of learning coverage. But I think he has the upside to be the best linebacker in this division. And for that reason alone, I would put the Packers because I think he's already a pretty solid player and then has that breakout capability to really solidify that position group. Quay Walker, I think, has been a disappointing pick for a while. I don't know if that will ever change. Like, I just think Quay Walker kind of is who he is. So maybe that's why it would keep them out of the second slotting in this position group. But I think I would lean the Packers. It's tough. It's hard to argue the next two. Ivan Pace is really good at specific things, right? At blitzing and run defense. And then Blake Cashman, I think, is more of a do-it-all guy, but he had undersized, small arms, like never been great at taking on the run. He kind of has to like beat blockers to gaps and stuff. So I don't know. I think at their peak, Snyder, I think TJ Edwards is the best linebacker of the Bears and Vikings. And I kind of like him in Dennis Allen's defense. So I don't know. I think I would maybe lean the Bears, but again, I'm not huge on Tremaine Edmonds. I could really be convinced either way. Who would you take in this discussion?
See, and that's the thing, like in this discussion, like I take in consideration, like here, the Brian Flores linebackers from a stat line perspective, like tackles and just sacks, they're going to probably look the best of the bunch. But you also got to consider like what they're asked to do. They probably have the easiest job. And I think Brian Flores is probably the most creative at, giving them wide open lanes to the quarterback, to the running back, and kind of making them look better. So I think for that reason, like I'm going to be lower on the Vikings because I know who the individual players are, right? I think if, TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds were on the Vikings, they'd be a hell of a lot better than those two individual players. And I can think the same thing about the Packers, to be honest. So I think I have to lean Packers 2, Bears 3, and then Vikings 4.
Yep, and I'm trying to get to just the regular season to look at coverage snaps, like who led teams in coverage snaps, and it's pretty hilarious when you look at what some of these Vikings linebackers were asked to do.
Dude.
Ivan Pace in coverage only had 165 snaps. There are backups on both teams that had more coverage snaps than the Vikings starting linebacker, which I know they sub him out a lot in passing situations. They'll put in a third safety or whatever the case may be. But that's kind of speaking to our point. Like we're not tasked with the same responsibilities that the Bears are and the other linebackers in this division. And the Bears and I will also say that they won't be tasked with what the Bears will be tasked with because of the scheme change with Dennis Allen. So yeah, I feel comfortable here. I will take, along with you, I will take the Bears as the third. I'll put the Packers second, the Bears third, and the Vikings fourth. Center, I don't want to do special teams. I'd rather do like play caller, like defensive play caller or offense. Let's do offensive play caller first, and we'll close out with defensive play caller. So, because head coach, I mean, we could do head coach, but Ben Johnson is a first time head coach, so I don't think that's fair yet to have that discussion. I think the Bears would be comfortably last just because they're the most unproven. So why don't we do offensive play caller? So obviously the Bears bring in Ben Johnson, huge upgrade at offensive play caller, but he's also in a division with Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur. And then obviously the Lions lose Ben Johnson, but they bring in John Morton, a guy who's been a play caller elsewhere and has been solid. I think he was with the Jets team in 2015 with Ryan Fitzpatrick when Ryan Fitzpatrick threw for like 4,500 yards. So definitely some intriguing elements with what the Lions did too. I don't know, Senator, how would you rank? I know there's some projection here, right? Because Ben Johnson is not with the Lions anymore, and he's coming over into a totally new situation. But if you're just looking at play caller alone, their track record, their resume, how would you rank the play callers offensively in this division?
I think it's incredibly tough, Tom. Here. You gotta look at it this way. I think Matt LaFleur, and he actually gets a lot of credit as being a damn good offensive play caller, damn good offensive mind. He gets production out of guys like Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Tucker Kraft. Like, you see the way their pass catching unit was built, right? A lot of day 2 picks, a lot of scheming guys. He gets really creative with Jaden Reed, in a lot of like gadget gimmicky roles type of there. But you see how he puts these guys in open space. He gets 4,000 yard production out of Jordan Love. You've seen he's had MVP seasons with Aaron Rodgers. Like, what Matt LaFleur has done throughout his entire tenure. Obviously not with Devontae Adams, but post Devontae Adams, the pass catching unit has been so average, right? But he always makes them look so productive, right? Because he's such a great play caller, because he's such a good play designer and everything. So as much as I think Kevin O'Connell has maybe more production, look at the comparison, Justin Jefferson. Like, there hasn't been a Justin Jefferson type of talent, not nowhere even close. And then they have Jordan Addison, they have TJ Hawkinson. Like, their skill players were so much better than the Packers. So like now, like it's hard to say the what if game, right? And I'm not saying Matthew Golden becomes that guy, but I'm just saying, like, what if Matt LaFleur had that same level of talent? So I think you have to look at it that way, Tom, between the two, because I think they're both damn good play callers. And I think, as much as I love Ben Johnson, I think it's really hard to just automatically put him above them. I don't know, Tom. Where are you at?
So I think from a resume perspective, I would put Ben Johnson as the number one play caller. If you want to take into account that he will not be with the Lions, it's a different situation. He has to prove, can he do this elsewhere? I totally hear you there. And I can totally hear the argument where you'd put LaFleur above Ben Johnson, because LaFleur has had like different versions of the Packers and they've always been a good offensive team. And if that's your argument, I hear you and I won't disagree with you there. If you want to put LaFleur, I think it's between LaFleur and Ben Johnson, because the one thing I will knock Kevin O'Connell that LaFleur and Ben Johnson have been able to accomplish is that they have been able to be multidimensional. What the Packers were able to do in the run game last year was kind of unlike any season of the Packers under LaFleur to this point. Like, they actually had a really, really good run game, and it's not like they ever had like bad run games, but like that, they were a running football team. They were one of the most run heavy in neutral situations. The Packers were one of the most run heavy teams, and yet still remained efficient. And that's something I don't think Kevin O'Connell, I'm not saying it's his fault, but that's something the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell have never really been able to accomplish. And I think the Lions with Ben Johnson, and then obviously the Packers have been able to threaten defenses efficiently with both elements of the offense. So for those reasons, I think I would put the top two as LaFleur and Ben Johnson. And that's where the argument comes into play. I think that Ben Johnson's peaks, what the Lions have been able to do, especially with how bad they were in the early parts of 2021, and then Ben Johnson comes in and things change immediately. Like they become one of the best offenses immediately. I think that speaks volumes about what he's been able to do and how balanced they've been able to do while being so efficient. So I think the peaks, I don't think anyone in this division, from a play caller perspective, have reached the peaks that Ben Johnson has. But longevity, how Matt LaFleur has been able to change with his team, going from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love to this young receiving core. Yeah. I can hear an argument where he's deserving of the number one spot as well, Snyder. Who would you pick of the two, unless you have a very strong argument for Kevin O'Connell?
Yeah, I mean, you made some great points with Kevin O'Connell, Tom. I just really like him. I think, you go back to the year prior when they lost Kirk Cousins and they're throwing out Jaron Hall, Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, and, I know 7 wins isn't high, but for most franchises who are rolling out those quarterbacks, they're picking top 3, right?
For sure.
I think, and it says a lot to their pass catching unit. Justin Jefferson, still a stud. He's going to make anyone better. But, man, it's just really hard to ignore, what Kevin O'Connell did with Sam Darnold, 4,600 yards from a guy who was, a backup, pretty much his whole career. But I think you make a fantastic point, and it holds a ton of weight in what LaFleur and what Ben Johnson are able to do in the run game, because that's what makes you a more balanced offense, right? Like, yes, it's impressive what he got out of the quarterback room, and that you want to figure out that first more than anything, right? Like, you want to know you have that stability there. But yeah, the run game is back, Tom. I mean, if you are an efficient running game, and you've seen it with the Lions, right? With Ben Johnson, you've seen it with the Packers, it just allows you to do so more, right? When you are in second and shorts, it makes the defense, it's really hard to predict that, right? And you get inconsistent second and short when you're extremely efficient in the run game there, right? So I think that's been their stopping card, is that they were better in the run game with Aaron Jones, but they weren't really efficient there.
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, all good, Tom. So again, I can't, I think what Kevin O'Connell got out of the quarterback is probably the most impressive out of the bunch, right? But we know, and the league is known, that you have to be balanced, you have to be efficient in the run game to really become that dominant team, to really control the clock, to really control the chains. And I think the league is getting back to seeing how important that is. I know the Vikings had 14 wins, but they completely stalled out in the playoffs for that reason. And then it's funny because you see the way the Packers stall out in the playoffs. I always think it's because of star power in the pass catching unit. But that's not, you can't really go back to LaFleur and saying hey man, you got dominated in the run game, or you got dominated in the passing attack. But I think really it's a little bit out of his control there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's hard to weigh that everything on O'Connell. I think O'Connell has done a lot to get around the fact that they haven't been able to run the ball because of the personnel that they had. So they had Alexander Madison as their lead back for, what I mean? So I don't want to pin that too much on him. And to O'Connell's credit, if we just want to look at pass game coordinators, he might be number one on this list. I think the thing that he does the best in the NFL of any offensive coordinator, I think he took what the Rams were doing to the next. He obviously came over from the Rams. I think he took what the Rams were doing to the next level because they obviously had Justin Jefferson, a talent the Rams did not have. But what the Rams really leaned into was truly making their best receivers the easy button of their offense, right? Like
Yep.
putting them in favorable situations, like moving guys who had never played in the slot to the slot, putting them in motion at the snap, playing them off the line of scrimmage, just like making them a mismatch problem.
Yes.
If you see everything that they do with Justin Jefferson, how often he's in motion at the snap and how just easy layups that they're able to get him down the field, it's as good as anybody in the league. Like they really spam all that stuff, which is why Justin Jefferson, like he had a very good rookie season, but when he got paired with Kevin O'Connell, took that to the next level, right? Like became like one of the best receivers of all time, is on pace to be one of the best receivers of all time. And Kevin O'Connell doesn't really get credit for that. So I definitely hear you there, Snyder. Like he's an incredible pass game coordinator. I think he could easily be at the top of this discussion with all the additions they made at the run game. And if they improve that, but I will also say where I don't think Ben Johnson gets a lot of credit is like Jared Goff was like thrown into the scrap heap when he was traded. Like everyone thought he was like barely a starting quarterback at the time. And he totally, obviously he had success with Sean McVay, Jared Goff did, but like the Jared Goff of now and how he's regarded among the league, like that was a huge part of that was Ben Johnson. Like Ben Johnson got more out of Jared Goff than Sean McVay did. And everyone was kind of out on Jared Goff. We were talking about in 2022 at the Lions, we're going to draft Malik Willis at number 3, right? And Ben Johnson really turned Jared Goff's career around with where it was headed. And for that reason alone, like not that reason alone, but I think it's kind of like the same argument with what you said. Obviously, Jared Goff is not like Nick Mullins and all the guys that you listed.
I hear your point, though.
Arnold, but Ben Johnson had a huge hand in getting the most out of Jared Goff, getting him extended, and really making the Lions believe in him as their guy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Tom. It does. Yeah, it is a similar conversation of Kevin O'Connell elevating his quarterback. So I think I'm with you there, Tom. But it's just like it's so hard because like Kevin O'Connell, like it's a tough group, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I really, to be honest, I'm not gonna lie or anything. I don't know too much about the Lions guy.
Yeah.
At all to really factor him into this conversation. I'm really not going to pretend like I do, but I think I'm leaning towards you, Tom. There, I think I do put LaFleur number 1, and I think Ben Johnson number 2.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I'm looking at his history. So no, he wasn't even the Jets offensive coordinator in that season with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was the Jets offensive coordinator in 2017, right? So like only 1 year as an offensive coordinator for the Lions, John Morton. So again, like a total question mark. I'm not saying it'll be bad. I'm just saying that it's hard to rank him amongst such a proven group. And Snyder, I will agree with you. I think LaFleur has the most proven track record. So for that reason alone, I will put him number 1. I will put the Bears number 2. And again, a lot of projection here as well because Ben Johnson is coming over in a new spot. But I want people to remember that the Lions were not looked upon as having this great offensive. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown was a 4th-round pick until Ben Johnson built that role for him, and he became the Amon-Ra St. Brown that we know. And I'm not saying it was all Ben Johnson, but like Ben Johnson's vision helped a lot of the star players on the Lions become who they were. And that's kind of what I think that will kind of translate anywhere. It's just whether or not Caleb Williams can be the guy to fit this offense, and Ben Johnson can build that offense through Caleb Williams' strengths. So I will put Matt LaFleur number 1, Ben Johnson number 2, Kevin O'Connell number 3, all in a very close tier together. And then John Morton's just a question mark. I don't know enough about him to have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, Tom. But like, don't sleep. Like Ben Johnson after this year could easily be the number 1 guy. As far as offensive rankings, player production, as far as balance and everything, he could comfortably be that number 1 guy, just given the talent and maybe depth on paper, especially in the pass catching room.
Most definitely. I'm right there with you. All right, why don't we close this out with defensive play caller? Because this one is also very, very interesting. So I think number 1, it's tough, right? I think Dennis Allen has done a great job of remaining one of the better defenses throughout his tenure with the Saints. Like, this was a defense that was in shambles before he was hired. They take maybe like a year or a year and a half or so, and then really hit their stride as a defense, and didn't really look back until last season, until this Saints defense just really aged out and like didn't have a lot of talent. But he's just found ways to be a top 10 defense as the Saints defensive play caller, Dennis Allen, who is now the Bears defensive coordinator. But when you look at what Brian Flores has been able to do over the past 2 years, and then just obviously throughout his career as well as a defensive play caller, I think it's between those two, Snyder, on who you would lean as the best one. Where would you go in this scenario?
I think I lean towards Brian Flores. I think that he can mask more in a defense, given like the lack of maybe quarterback talent. I think he could be just a little bit more creative, and he could overcome less talent more so than like a Dennis Allen can.
And that's fair. I hear you there. And I think just like the innovation that he's brought to the league and what the league is like been trying to copy. He's like the it guy right now, right? Like, everyone wants a Brian Flores type of defense. It was Fangio, it was Mike McDonald. I think people want some of the stuff that Brian Flores is doing. And for that reason, I got no problem putting the Vikings number 1. I think the Bears are then comfortably number 2. I think honestly, the list, the way we have it out, is probably how I would rank it. Jeff Hafley, only 1 year as the defensive coordinator with the Packers, but they were a pretty solid defense. If you look at their overall efficiency, I think that they have limitations talent-wise, and maybe that's what held them back. I didn't think Hafley did anything overly special, but again, I think they were a very sound defense. And then with the Lions, another question mark, right? Like, first-time defensive coordinator, we really don't know what they have in Calvin Shepard. I think he was their linebackers coach they promoted. So I think it's too early to tell what the Packers have exactly with Jeff Hafley. And then there's just an absolute question mark with the Lions.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to debate there, Tom. I think comfortably Vikings and Bears 1 and 2. And we're just going to have to see with the Packers and Lions there, Tom. But I think it's weird, right? Like, you have the Lions who, again, they lose Ben Johnson, they lose Aaron Glenn, and they go from comfortably the number 1 coaching staff as a whole. Now there's more questions, right? And again, I'm not gonna overthink this. Again, Jared Goff and his connection to his wide receivers, and the connection to the offensive line. I don't think they're gonna have this massive regression or regression at all. By I think the chemistry there, I think they're going to run and implement, very similar systems as Ben Johnson does. But I think Aaron Glenn is probably, you might feel the most there, Tom, because I think he was damn good. I think he was a damn good leader. I think he was just a total football guy through in and throughout. So I think maybe on the defensive side is a little bit more of a question mark. So where at least on the offense side, you still have the stability of Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't think they're going to miss anything there, but defensively, I think maybe a little bit more concerning.
Yeah, I honestly, Senator, and maybe this is wrong for me to look at it. I always look at it when you're hiring new coordinators, I'd rather you go outside the building. And obviously, it's hard to do that when you've been so successful.
Yeah.
And you think that, hey, I can just promote someone and we can continue to do what we do. But I just think that rarely ever works out.
Right.
I think I'd rather get new ideas in the building and get someone who's going to bring something new to the table than try to recreate whatever you had, because the guy that the guys that led those ideas are now out the building, right? They're not there anymore. So to try to force someone to be someone who they're not, I think is always kind of a weird situation. That's why I kind of liked what they did for an offensive coordinator. They went outside their building. They went over and plucked someone from the Broncos staff. When on defense, they just promoted someone from within. So yeah. I'm with you there. I didn't love that process per se, but he could totally prove me wrong. And we could be having a different discussion. So if we're just looking across, Snyder, now that we're done, it seems like we still believe the Lions are the favorite in this division. We feel like they're still the best team, the team to beat. I think it's pretty much a toss-up after that from a roster perspective. Maybe the Packers would be the second team. Like, I don't know why that shook out the way it did, because the Vikings were obviously a better team than the Packers last year. But the Bears are also right in that mix as well. I think it's a pretty good mix. I think the Packers are pretty stable with their run game and offensive line. But outside of that, I don't think they really have a notch up over the Bears or Vikings in any specific category. I think it's pretty mixed across the board. I don't know, Sider. I don't want you to like look at this tier making in depthly, but how would you rank just the standings on how you think the division will finish next year, or like from a roster construction as a whole, how would you rank the division?
Yeah, I mean, from a roster construction on paper, I mean, we both agree it's the Lions are number one there. I don't think I'm crazy to say that the Bears are number two, right? Again, it's such a hypothetical, but when it comes to talent, when it comes to the head coach, play caller, when it comes to pass catching, offensive line improvements, secondary, solid defensive line across the board, I lean roster construction, Bears being the number two spot, how I'd ideally want to build a roster. And, you can talk yourself into, if Caleb lives up to his talent and becomes worthy of that number one overall pick, there's more upside there than maybe any other the quarterbacks. Combine that with, I love the way they built the roster on paper and everything that, you see the upside there. You see a very deep wide receiver room. You see a very versatile tight end room, and Colston Lovin might be that, I know it's crazy to say, but he has the potential to be that Travis Kelce, George Kittle level of impact type of tight end. And if that reaches out here too, I mean, you got to feel really damn good about the Bears. And again, it's going to be a tough ass division, right? Like, we just laid out so many reasons why don't overlook Kevin O'Connell. Like, he, gets a lot out of his quarterback. They just won 14 games. Like, don't overlook them. And then we both just said, we think Matt LaFleur is the best play caller. You've seen what he's done with Jordan Love. You've seen what he's done with some very average mid day two pass catching group, and he gets them very productive. So it's gonna be a gauntlet, right? So I really think that this division, I don't think the Lions will be in last place, but I just think there's gonna be a lot of parity between this division. It is gonna be an absolute gauntlet, Tom, and it can go a lot of different ways, but I don't think it's the Bears fan in me. I think we're so brutally honest that I just believe in the Bears more than I do the other teams. Tom, I think you're muted, brother.
Sorry about that. Some dude with a loud motor was driving by. I didn't want him to interrupt. But I think the Bears have the most variance. They probably have like some of the most upside in the division because of Caleb Williams hits a stride and really gels with Ben Johnson. Like, this could be one of the best offenses in the league. But they probably also have the lowest floor too. One of the lowest floors. I think it's between them and the Vikings, given their kind of uncertainties at quarterback. So, yeah, there's a lot of variance on the directions that both teams can do. But if you're looking at just an overall roster construction, I have no problem if you want to put the Bears at number two. And, odds to win the division, I think, is a bit tougher. Again, I think it's the Lions and Packers are probably the safer picks. But in terms of like who could actually make some noise, I think that's where the Vikings and the Bears come into factor. Like, I think the Packers' problems are still very much the same issues, whereas the Bears could have legitimately addressed those issues, bringing in Ben Johnson and having a competent coaching staff to get the most out of Caleb Williams and the rest of the Bears roster. And then the Vikings, you feel good about what they've been able to do with all the different quarterbacks. It's really whether or not JJ McCarthy can continue to steer that ship. So, like you said, it's a really competitive division. How are the Lions going to look without their two play callers? Like, are they going to really take a big step back? Is that going to be a huge factor? It's really hard to say. I think the Lions are the safe favorite, but really it could be anyone's division when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I hate to maybe like close out on like a negative note, but here, like my reservations on the Bears is how efficient are they going to be in the running game, right? Like
Yes.
you know Ben Johnson individually, like he's gonna probably have a productive year. Like he's an incredible run designer. You did add Eric Bieniemy to hopefully strengthen, but again, like you can't ignore that DeAndre Swift, he was probably the worst efficient running back in the NFL time. It was something like that, right? So does that hold the Bears back? Does that, put the Bears in, more second and longs, third and longs, like it did last year? I mean, you assume it's going to get better with Ben Johnson, but like, and they didn't really address anything significant, right? Like it's the kind of the same room as it was last year, unless you want to convince yourself into the 7th round draft pick, Kyle Monica. I can't pronounce his last name, but like I think that's a little bit wishful thinking early on. So like that's like the reservation. But then again, like the defensive line, right? Like they beefed it up, and they added some guys that you're not going to lose some penetration, but you're one Montez Sweat injury away from it being a really bad unit, not really being able to rush the passer too much. And again, we've seen throughout the polls, Eberflus era, you give quarterbacks all day to throw, they're going to eat you up, right? Mm-hmm. So again, like that, those are my. If I want to talk myself into like maybe worst case scenario, and maybe why the Bears don't take that massive leap, those would be my two biggest reasons on why.
Yep, I'm right there with you. We talk about Caleb Williams and question marks about how quickly he can hit the ground running. I thought the run game is a great point that maybe we haven't talked about enough on this episode. The Lions, since Ben Johnson has been the offensive play caller for the Lions, they have been the 5th most efficient rushing team per EPA per rush, and they've had the 6th best rushing success rate. So I don't know if that's going to carry over right away with the Bears, given how things are currently constructed. And it seems like a pretty big component of who Ben Johnson wants to be. So yeah, it's a great reason to be a little skeptical about how much success the Bears can have right away. You're hoping that that can improve throughout the season and with the guys that they currently have, but you really got to squint to kind of see the pathways to that efficient of a run game.
And if you want to be a little bit more optimistic about it, hey, when DeAndre Swift was with Ben Johnson, that was his most efficient year. He was dealing with nagging injuries, but at the same time, like they really, as far as like rushing attempts, more so in between the tackles, obviously in the goal line, Jamal Williams played a huge role in that as well. But again, DeAndre Swift did see a lot of touches as a receiver as well. So, like maybe DeAndre Swift from efficiency maybe can get back to there, but then you don't know because does someone carve out that Jamal Williams role? It's hard to, for me, imagine that Roschon Johnson or Kyle Mongo do carve out that significant of a role. It can happen, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I think it's maybe hard to maybe hand them that and automatically reduce that role from Swift when last year, even though it wasn't pretty, he was the best running back at, that dirty work. Again, low standard, but that's going to be the most interesting thing to see how it plays out this year. It's such a weird pairing.
It is a very weird pairing, and they could still make a move, right? Like it's not over. If they hit the ground running and they want to be more aggressive to upgrade the running back in season, that's definitely on the table as well. All right, I think we have covered the tiers and the rankings of this division position by position. We probably won't be back next week. I will be in Florida on vacation. So I don't know, Steiner may record, do a solo podcast, or maybe we'll get a guest or something like that. But we might take a week off, just a quick break for y'all. But we will be back the following week. bring you guys more content. And yeah, more discussion. Snyder, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, that's it, brother.
All right, y'all. Well, until we meet again, keep it real. Bear down.
Bear down.